45 seconds. That was all the time Justin Brent had before a man died. He didn't know that yet. Right now, all he knew was that his hands were steady. The burgundy in the decanter was breathing just right, and table 7 needed a refill before the head sommelier noticed he'd been gone too long. Obsidian Lotus didn't tolerate slowness. It didn't tolerate mistakes. And it absolutely, without question, did not tolerate omegas. Justin moved fast through the narrow corridor that connected the main floor to the temperature-controlled wine cellar. The blizzard outside had been hammering Chicago for 6 straight hours. He could hear the wind pressing against the restaurant's outer walls like something angry trying to get in. But inside, everything was warmth and low light and the quiet clink of crystal. Tables draped in white linen. Candles reflecting off polished floors. The kind of room that cost more per hour than Justin made in a week. He pushed open the cellar door. Cold air hit his face. And then he heard the voices. 2 men, speaking fast. Not English, Russian. Justin had grown up 4 blocks from a community center in Englewood. He didn't speak Russian, but he'd worked enough tables in enough restaurants to recognize the cadence. Tight, clipped, deliberate. These 2 weren't catching up. They weren't complaining about the weather. They were planning. He pressed himself flat against the stone wall beside a row of 2014 Bordeaux and stopped breathing. One word cut through clearly. Sniper. Then another. Signal. Jammer. Then a phrase he didn't need to translate because the meaning sat in his chest like a brick. When the dessert spoon hits the table, Justin's fingers went cold around the decanter. He moved his head just enough to see them, 2 men in server uniforms that fit slightly wrong, too tight across the shoulders. Standing beside a crate near the far wall that definitely was not a wine shipment. One of them held a slim black device the size of a television remote. The other was watching the small screen of a phone, nodding once, slow and certain. Cameras looped. That's what Justin understood next. The security cameras in this building were running on a loop. Whatever happened tonight, the footage would show nothing. He stepped back out of the cellar. His pulse was slamming. He walked back onto the main floor with the decanter in his hands and his face completely blank. Hi viewers, have you ever been in a situation where you knew the right thing to do, but doing it could cost you everything? Table 7 was already buzzing. The party had grown since Justin's last pass, 11 people now instead of 9. But the 3 who had arrived late were impossible to miss. They moved differently than everyone else in the room. Like the air around them adjusted when they walked through it. The Torrey brothers. Justin had heard their names the way most people in Chicago had, in whispers, in headlines, in the kind of careful conversation that stopped the moment a stranger walked close. Claudio, Varick, and Soren Torrey. Triplets. The kind of men who made powerful people nervous just by showing up. Claudio sat at the center of the table. Dark suit. No tie. One hand resting on the white linen with a stillness that was almost wrong. Too controlled. Like a man who had taught himself never to show tension even when he felt it. His fiancée Roberto sat directly beside him. Justin began filling glasses from the left side, the way he'd been trained. Quiet, smooth, invisible. That was the whole job. Be invisible. He was almost past Claudio when it happened. The man turned his head, slowly, deliberately, and looked directly at Justin. Not the polite glance a guest gives a server. A look, focused, measuring. And then Claudio Torrey opened his mouth and spoke 3 words in a language that stopped Justin's entire body. It wasn't Italian. It wasn't Russian. It was a dialect so old and so regional that Justin had only ever heard it in one place in his entire life. Sitting on the floor of his grandmother Delia's kitchen in Bronzeville while she hummed and cooked and sometimes talked to herself in the language her own grandmother had brought from a village that didn't exist on most maps anymore. Claudio said, in that language, "Do you understand me?" Justin stood completely still. The decanter was in his hands. The blizzard pushed against the windows. And somewhere in this building, two men in wrong-fitting uniforms were waiting for a dessert spoon to hit a table. Justin's mouth opened, closed. He understood every word Claudio had just said. And the look on Claudio Torri's face made one thing perfectly clear. He already knew that. Justin kept his face neutral. It was a skill he'd spent years building, the kind of expression that said nothing, gave away nothing, asked for nothing. In his world, showing too much on your face was how you got hurt. He poured the burgundy. Smooth, steady, moved to the next glass. But his mind was running at full speed. Claudio Torri had just spoken to him in a dialect that maybe 300 people alive still understood. A language tied to a specific coastal region, carried over decades through family lines that rarely crossed. His grandmother had called it a home tongue. Something you kept close, something you didn't share with just anyone. So the question that now lived inside Justin's chest like a hot coal was simple and terrifying. Why does a mafia king know it? And the second question, the worst one, why did he use it on me? Justin moved away from the table before his expression could shift. He walked back toward the service hall, jaw tight, thoughts burning. He needed to think. He also needed to figure out how to warn a man who might already be testing whether Justin was worth trusting, and do it without blowing the one thing he absolutely could not afford to lose. This job. Justin had worked at Obsidian Lotus for 4 months, under a fake employment record, with an identity that said he was a standard beta, nothing special, no designation flags, because if anyone in this building knew what he actually was, he would have been fired before his first shift ended. Omegas were not allowed here. The policy wasn't posted anywhere. It didn't need to be. It was the kind of rule that lived in the air, enforced by smell, by status, by the careful chemistry of suppressors and expired patches and the specific brand of desperation that made Justin show up every night regardless. He reached the server station and pressed his back against the wall. Breathed. The patch on his left shoulder was old. He'd stretched this 1-2 weeks past its replacement date because the pharmacy had been out of stock and the next shipment wasn't due until Thursday. Tonight was Monday. He pressed his fingers briefly against the edge of it through his white dress shirt. Still holding. For now. He closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Clara. That was the only reason any of this made sense. His sister was 14 years old and had been fighting a glandular failure since she was 11. The doctors had a name for it, a long clinical name that Justin had memorized and repeated so many times it had stopped meaning anything. But what it came down to was simple and brutal. Without synthetic gland therapy, administered on a consistent schedule, Clara's body would keep declining. Slowly, steadily, until it stopped entirely. The therapy cost more per month than Justin made at 2 of his 3 jobs combined. So he worked here, under false documentation, carrying a wine decanter through a restaurant that would throw him out immediately if they knew the truth. He opened his eyes. Across the room, Claudio Torri was laughing at something Roberto said. The laugh didn't reach his eyes. Justin had noticed that 20 minutes ago. He noticed things, it was what made him good at this job. He could read a table in 30 seconds. Body language, energy, the small shifts that told him who needed space and who needed attention. Claudio was uncomfortable tonight. Not visibly. Not in any way a normal person would catch. But the way his left hand kept returning to the table. The way his eyes moved to the entrance every few minutes, just briefly. The way he sat slightly forward, not relaxed, not really, like a man who was performing calm instead of feeling it. His instincts were up. Something in that man's body already knew this room wasn't safe. Justin watched Roberto lean close and say something quiet into Claudio's ear. Claudio smiled, but his left hand, the one Roberto couldn't see, pressed flat against the linen. Hard. Justin turned away. The sniper was waiting. The cameras were looped, and the dessert course hadn't come out yet. He went back to the cellar. He had to. Justin needed to be certain about what he'd heard, because what he was considering doing next was the kind of thing that couldn't be undone. Once you warned a man like Claudio Torri, you didn't get to take it back. You didn't get to say you were mistaken. You were in it. The cellar door swung open quietly. The two men were gone. But the crate was still there. Justin crossed the room in 8 steps and pulled back the tarp covering it with 2 fingers. He stared at what was inside for 4 full seconds. Then he let the tarp fall. His hands were shaking now, the first time all night. He pressed them flat against his thighs and breathed through his nose and told himself to focus. There was a radio receiver tucked behind the crate. Small, military-looking. A green light blinked steadily on its face. Active, transmitting, connected to something outside this building. The signal jammer would kill communications inside the restaurant the moment it activated. Nobody calls for help. Nobody calls for backup. Nobody calls for anything. He turned and walked out of the cellar and straight to the service station near the back hallway. He grabbed a receipt pad, the handwritten kind they used for special requests, and pulled a pen from his breast pocket. His handwriting was small and steady even though his pulse was not. He wrote, "Your fiancé sold you out. They're here. Wine cellar. Sniper outside. Signal jammer ready. Trigger is the dessert spoon." He folded the receipt once. Then he looked across the dining room at table 7 and understood the problem. Claudio was surrounded. His brothers on one side, Roberto directly beside him, close enough to see anything that passed between them. 2 security men standing near the rear wall who Justin now realized were probably not actually Tory security. He couldn't just hand the note over. He picked up the decanter, walked back out onto the floor. His heart was running. His face was not. He approached the table from Claudio's right side, which put Roberto out of his direct line of sight. He filled Claudio's glass slowly, the kind of pour that required leaning in slightly, close enough that the fold of white linen created a brief blind angle between his hand and Roberto's view. He set the glass down and left the note beneath it, turned, walked away. He made it 6 steps before he heard the shift behind him. Not loud, not dramatic. Just silence where there had been ambient sound, the small kind of silence that meant someone had noticed something. Justin kept walking. His patch chose that exact moment to fail. He felt it before he understood it. A warmth that started at his left shoulder and moved outward, like a seal breaking. The chemistry he'd been hiding behind for 4 months dissolving in real time, molecule by molecule, rising off his skin and into the conditioned air of Obsidian Lotus's main floor. Rainwater. Wild sage. The scent was quiet at first. Then it wasn't. It moved through the room the way smoke moves, no direction, no apology, touching everything. Justin stopped walking. His entire body went rigid. He didn't turn around. But he felt it the moment Claudio Torri's instincts locked onto him. A pressure in the room that hadn't been there a second ago, like something enormous had just gone very, very still. Justin finally turned. Claudio was looking at him. The note was in his hand. His eyes were cold in a way that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with calculation. The look of a man rapidly processing information that was rearranging everything he thought he knew about the last several months. He looked down at the note. Then he looked up at Roberto. Roberto smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not a caught smile. A smile that knew it had been seen and didn't care. The silver dessert spoon hit the white linen. Time broke open. The first shot came through the window on the east side of the dining room. A single sharp crack that punched through the glass and took out the centerpiece on table 3 in an explosion of crystal and white roses. For 1 full second the room didn't react. 47 people in the middle of expensive meals and the room just stopped, suspended like everyone needed that second to understand what had just happened. Then the screaming started. The Russian shooters came in through the service entrance. 4 of them, moving fast and low, already inside before the first patron had gotten to their feet. They weren't there to rob anyone. They moved with a specific direction, straight toward table 7, straight toward Claudio. Claudio was already moving. He flipped the table with one hand. Glasses, candles, Roberto's untouched dessert, all of it, and the heavy marble top became a barrier between the table and the open room. He grabbed Justin by the arm in the same motion, not rough, not asking, just pulling, and put himself between Justin and the direction the shot had come from. Justin's back hit the overturned table. Claudio's body was directly in front of him. "Don't move," Claudio said quietly. Not a request. Justin didn't move. On the other side of the room, Varric and Soren were already separating. No words passed between the three brothers. None were needed. Varric moved left, cutting off the angle to the kitchen exit. Soren went right, low and fast, drawing two of the shooters toward the far wall and away from the clustered guests who were scrambling under tables, under each other, under anything they could find. Coordinated. Automatic. Like this was not the first time this had happened. A second shot came from outside. The window above Justin's head exploded inward. Claudio dropped lower, pressing Justin further down, and said something fast and sharp in the rare dialect. Justin understood it. He found that deeply strange. Standing in a restaurant under active gunfire and being mildly struck by the grammatical precision of the sentence. What Claudio had said to his brothers was, "Roberto is the door. Close it." Justin's stomach dropped. He looked across the chaos of the overturned dining room. Roberto was gone. Not hiding. Not screaming. Not crouched behind a chair like the other guests. Gone. The table they'd shared. The spot where Roberto had sat close all evening, smiling, whispering, performing a relationship in public, was empty. A service door on the south wall swung slowly on its hinge. Roberto had left before the first shot landed. He'd known exactly when it was coming. He'd been the one who told them. Justin looked at the dessert spoon on the floor. It had rolled 6 inches from where it landed. That was the signal. Roberto had placed it. Claudio growled, low, controlled, and looked at Justin with an expression that was impossible to fully read because it contained too many things at once. Fury, clarity, and something underneath both of those that looked almost like relief, like a man who had just confirmed something he'd been afraid to believe. "The back exit," Claudio said. Justin started to say he didn't know where it was. Claudio was already pulling him forward. The sniper fired again. The shot hit the wall 2 feet above where Justin's head had been a second before. Claudio looked at him, direct, no ceremony. "Jump," he said. The back exit door hit the outside wall with a sound like a gunshot of its own. Wind screamed in immediately. Real Chicago blizzard wind, the kind that had a physical weight to it, that pushed back against your body when you tried to move through it. The cold was immediate and total. Justin had left his coat inside. He was in his server's uniform, white shirt, black vest, black slacks, and the temperature outside was somewhere around 7 degrees before the wind added its opinion. He looked down. The exit opened onto a maintenance ledge. 20 feet below was an alley buried under 2 feet of fresh snow, still falling, the flakes fat and fast and sideways in the gale. Justin looked at Claudio. Claudio looked at the drop. Then he jumped. He hit the snowbank below in a controlled roll that made it look almost practiced, came up on one knee, and looked back up at Justin with an expression that said nothing except, "Your turn." Behind Justin, inside the restaurant, something broke. Glass or wood, hard to tell. The shooter on the south hall was moving closer. Justin jumped. The drop lasted longer than he expected. The cold air rushed past his face. And then the snow came up fast and swallowed him whole, cold and silent and shocking, and he lay there for exactly 1 second completely still, staring up at the Chicago sky which was orange-black and full of falling white, thinking that this was the strangest night of his life. Claudio's hand found his arm and pulled him upright. They moved. The alley ran east between 2 brick buildings, the snow covering the ground in a way that made every step loud and slow. Varric and Soren came over the ledge 40 seconds behind them. Varric landing clean, Soren rolling with what looked like a shoulder injury he was already ignoring. Gunfire inside the restaurant, muffled now by walls and distance. They ran. Justin's thin-soled server shoes were soaked through in seconds. His lungs burned with cold air. But he kept pace. Partly because Claudio was still holding his arm, and partly because the alternative was stopping in a blizzard in an alley while people with guns looked for them, which was not a reasonable alternative. They came out the far end of the alley onto a side street that was almost completely empty. The blizzard had cleared the roads. A black armored SUV was parked 20 feet ahead, engine already running, exhaust smoke whipping sideways in the wind. The door opened before they reached it. Inside was warm and quiet and smelled like leather and something faintly metallic. Justin climbed in. The door closed. The blizzard disappeared. Just like that, from chaos to silence in the space of a car door shutting. Justin sat back against the seat. His whole body was shaking. Cold, adrenaline, or both, he couldn't separate them anymore. His wet shirt clung to his back. His fingers had gone numb somewhere between the ledge and the alley. He pressed his hands between his knees and breathed. Claudio sat beside him. Not close, not crowding, just present. A large, warm, still presence in the seat next to him, watching Justin with an expression that was hard to name because it was too careful. Like a man choosing exactly how much to show. Then the warmth in the car did what the cold outside had temporarily interrupted. Justin's scent came back. Rainwater, wild sage, and underneath it, the note that had been impossible to hide for weeks now, the one that his suppressors had been barely managing before the patch failed completely. Something warmer, deeper, the scent that came with a second heartbeat. Claudio went very still. Not the stillness of a man who was alarmed. The stillness of a man who was recalibrating. His jaw tightened once, then relaxed. He reached to the back of his seat, unclipped his long coat from the hook there, and placed it over Justin's shoulders without a word. No ceremony, no statement, just warmth offered and given. Justin stared at the coat. He stared at the man beside him. He had walked into work tonight to pour wine and disappear. He had not planned for any of this. He had not planned on overhearing Russian in a cellar, or passing a note under a wine glass, or jumping off a ledge in a blizzard, or sitting in the back of an armored car smelling like an Omega who was very clearly, undeniably, in his second trimester. The question came out before he could stop it. Why did you save me? The SUV moved through the empty white streets of Chicago. Claudio looked straight ahead for a moment. Then he turned his head and looked at Justin with an expression that was quieter than anything else he'd shown all night. Because you saved me first, he said. The car kept moving. The blizzard pressed against the windows. And Justin Brent, invisible Omega waiter, pregnant and patchless and soaking wet in a borrowed coat, understood that whatever his life had been before tonight, it was gone. The penthouse was 42 floors above Lake Michigan, and the blizzard didn't care. It pressed against the floor-to-ceiling glass like it had a personal problem with the people inside. Justin stood at the window in dry clothes. Someone had handed him a stack of folded sweats without explanation, and stared at the white nothing below. The lake had disappeared. The city had mostly disappeared. Just wind and snow and the faint orange smear of streetlights buried somewhere underneath all of it. He was warm. That was the strange part. He was standing in the home of a man whose name appeared in federal case files and city council whispers and the kind of news articles that got pulled 2 days after they ran, and he was warm and dry, and there was a cup of tea on the counter behind him that someone had made without being asked. His hands had stopped shaking. He wasn't sure when that happened. Sit down. Claudio's voice came from across the room. Not harsh. Not a command the way commands usually felt. More like a man who was tired of watching someone refuse to take care of themselves. Justin sat. Claudio sat across from him. He'd removed his jacket. The sleeves of his white dress shirt were rolled to the elbow. There was a shallow cut across his left forearm that he hadn't mentioned and wasn't going to mention. He looked like a man who had run through a blizzard and handled a firefight and was still, somehow, completely present. The pregnancy, Claudio said. Direct. No lead-in. How far? Justin looked at him. 19 weeks, he said. Claudio absorbed that without changing his expression. You were working a service shift at 19 weeks. I was working 3 jobs at 19 weeks. A pause. Why 3? Justin looked at his hands. He told him about Clara. Not everything. Not the full history, the diagnosis at 11, the specialist visits, the months where Justin had rationed his own food to cover the pharmacy bill. He gave Claudio the facts. Clara's age. The condition. The cost. The math that never added up no matter how many shifts he picked up. Claudio listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer sympathy in the way people offered sympathy when they wanted to move past a difficult topic quickly. He just listened, still the way a man listens when he's actually tracking every word. When Justin finished, the room was quiet except for the wind. Then Claudio said something that Justin didn't expect. I ignored the signs about Roberto for 8 months. Justin looked up. Claudio's jaw was set. Not with anger, with something harder to name. The specific weight of a man holding himself accountable for something that cost more than he wanted to admit. He was careful, Claudio continued. Consistent. I had evidence twice that something was wrong and I explained it away both times. He paused. Power makes you think your instincts are above being wrong. They're not. Justin stared at him. This was not what he had expected from a mafia king in a Lake Michigan penthouse. He wasn't sure what he'd expected. Less honesty, probably. More armor. Varick appeared in the hallway doorway. Medical's here. Claudio stood. The doctor was a woman named Dr. Amara Solis. Quiet, efficient, clearly not surprised to be making a house call to a penthouse at 1 in the morning during a blizzard. She examined Justin, confirmed the pregnancy was stable, administered a stabilizer injection, and left a prenatal supplement kit without making it feel like a transaction. Afterward, Justin sat on the edge of the guest room bed and stared at the floor. Claudio appeared in the doorway. I need you to stay, he said, until the threat is contained. Roberto is still out there. Ivan Oleg, the man who funded the hit, he's still out there. He paused. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to stay alive long enough to make that choice yourself. Justin looked at him. And in exchange? Clara's treatment. Full coverage. Immediately. Justin's throat tightened. He looked away. The blizzard pressed against the window. There are 3 dominant alphas in this building, Justin said quietly. Yes. And you want me to live here. I want you to be safe. Those happen to be the same thing right now. Justin said nothing for a moment. Then Claudio added, quieter. Tomorrow we expose the traitor. Justin looked up. Claudio's expression was calm, but his eyes were not. The tailor arrived at 7 in the morning. Justin was still half asleep when Soren knocked on the guest room door and told him, with absolutely no preamble, that someone needed to measure him. Justin had stared at Soren, who was somehow already dressed and alert at 7 a.m. after a firefight and a blizzard escape, and decided that asking questions was going to take more energy than he currently had. He let the tailor measure him. The man worked in silence with the specific focus of someone who understood that his job was not to comment on the situation. He took measurements, made notes in a small leather book, and was gone within 20 minutes. By 9, a rack of clothing appeared in the guest room. Justin stood in front of it for a long time. He was used to other people's cast-offs. Thrift store finds. Clothes bought on sale 2 seasons late. His uniform at Obsidian Lotus had been the nicest thing he owned, and that belonged to the restaurant, not to him. This was different. A charcoal wool coat, tailored. Dark trousers with a clean break. A deep blue shirt, soft and structured. Boots that fit before he put them on. Somehow, like the tailor had accounted for something the measurements didn't capture. He put them on slowly, looked in the mirror. He didn't recognize himself. Not in a bad way. In a way that felt like a door opening that he hadn't known was there. Then Claudio appeared behind him in the mirror's reflection. He stopped in the doorway, looked at Justin for a moment. Not the way a man looks at someone he's evaluating. The way a man looks at something that has surprised him. "There's one more thing," Claudio said. He stepped forward and held out an omega collar. Justin's jaw tightened immediately. He recognized it, the design, the weight, the meaning embedded in it. A public declaration of ownership. Or at least that was what most people understood it to mean. "No," Justin said. "It's a protection collar," Claudio said. "Not ownership. There's a difference." He kept his hand extended, holding it. "In public, this tells every alpha in the room that you are under the Tory name. No one touches you. No one approaches you without going through me first." He paused. "Tonight, with Roberto in the room and Ivan Oleg's people watching every entrance, you need that." Justin looked at the collar, then at Claudio. "Nothing happens without my consent," Claudio said quietly. "I told you that. I meant it." The room was still. Justin took the collar. He didn't put it on. Not yet. He held it in his hands and felt the weight of it and thought about Clara, who was currently in a hospital across the city getting her first fully funded treatment session because Claudio Torri had made a call at 6 in the morning and it was done by 6:15. That mattered. He thought about what Claudio had said last night. About Roberto. About ignoring the signs. About power making you think your instincts were above being wrong. A man who couldn't admit that would never have said it. Varick's voice came down the hall. Security intercepted a message. Both of them turned. Varick stood in the doorway holding a phone. His expression was the flattest Justin had seen yet, and Varick's expressions were already remarkably flat. "Ivan Oleg," Varick said. "He knows we survived. He knows Justin passed the note." He paused. "He's calling it unfinished business." Claudio looked at Justin. Justin looked at the collar in his hands. Unfinished business. That meant the war Roberto had started wasn't over. It was just moving to a new location. The Tory Estate ballroom looked like nothing had happened. That was the point. Marble floors polished to a mirror. Chandeliers burning at full brightness. A string quartet in the corner playing something European and calm. Waitstaff moving through the room with the same invisible precision that Justin had practiced for months, and now watched from the other side of. He stood near the entrance beside Claudio. Not behind him, beside him. That difference was not lost on the people in the room. Heads turned. Eyes moved. Fast, careful, the way eyes move in rooms where reputations are currency and appearances are transactions. Justin felt every look. He was not dressed like a waiter tonight. He was not invisible. The tailored coat, the collar at his throat, the simple fact of his position next to Claudio Torri in a room full of the most connected people in Chicago. All of it sent a message that he hadn't written but was being read in real time by everyone present. Roberto arrived at 8:45. Justin felt Claudio go still the moment Roberto walked through the entrance. Not tense. Not shaking. Still. The specific stillness of a man who has been waiting. Roberto looked perfect. Of course he did. Dark suit. Easy posture. The smile of a man who believed he had won something and hadn't yet been told otherwise. He scanned the room, found Claudio, and let the smile settle into something that was supposed to read as warmth. He crossed the room. "Claudio." He stopped a few feet away. His eyes moved to Justin, a flicker, controlled. "But there. I heard there was an incident last night." "I'm glad you're safe." Claudio said nothing for 3 full seconds. In a room like this, 3 seconds was loud. "Sit down, Roberto," he said. Roberto sat. The evening proceeded with a kind of surface calm that had teeth underneath it. Roberto talked. He explained his disappearance during the shooting as panic. "I froze. I ran. I'm not proud of it." He expressed appropriate concern. He used Claudio's name with the practiced familiarity of someone who had been building that intimacy for a long time. Justin watched. He watched the way Roberto's hands moved. The way his eyes tracked the room's exits every few minutes. Habit overriding performance. The way he never quite looked directly at Varric or Soren, who were stationed on opposite sides of the ballroom with the careful non-presence of men who were very much present. Then Claudio reached into his jacket pocket, placed a small remote on the table. Roberto's eyes dropped to it. 1 second of stillness. Claudio pressed play. The room heard it through the sound system. Quiet enough that it sounded accidental, loud enough that the nearest tables caught every word. Roberto's voice, clear and unmistakable, discussing timing, discussing the signal jammer, discussing the dessert spoon with the precise logistical language of someone who had planned it carefully and wanted credit for the planning. The string quartet stopped playing. The room held its breath. Roberto's face went through 3 expressions in under 2 seconds, and the third one, the one that settled, was not the one of a man who was sorry. It was the one of a man calculating how much time he had left. He stood. His hand moved toward his jacket. And then the ballroom windows exploded inward. All of them, at once. Ivan Oleg's people came through every opening simultaneously. 8 men, armed, moving with the kind of coordination that said this had been planned longer than tonight. The guests went down. Chairs scraping, glass breaking. The sound of a room full of people dropping to the floor in the space of a breath. Justin didn't drop. He stood completely still for 1 second. Then he moved. The ballroom became something else entirely. Not a party. Not an ambush. Something in between. A moving, shifting landscape of overturned furniture and broken glass and the specific controlled chaos of men who knew what they were doing moving through a space full of people who did not. Justin moved toward the cluster of guests nearest the east wall. Not away from them. Toward. He didn't think about it. There were 8 people, 2 elderly, 1 woman in a wheelchair, 3 who had frozen entirely and needed someone to tell them which direction to go. Justin got to them in 12 steps, crouching low, using the overturned tables as cover the way Claudio had used the table at Obsidian Lotus the night before. This way, he said, flat, calm. The voice he used when a table was panicking and needed to be redirected without making the panic worse. Stay low. Move together. Don't stop. They moved. He got them to the kitchen corridor. A narrow hallway that Ivan Oleg's people hadn't covered, either because they'd missed it or because they'd decided civilians weren't the objective tonight. Justin turned back. The ballroom was still loud. Varric had taken down 2 of the shooters near the north entrance. Soren was on the far side, cut off from Claudio, managing his own corner with a focus that looked almost bored. Claudio was center room, moving, and there was something extraordinary about watching him operate. Not because it was violent, but because of the economy of it. Nothing wasted. Every decision made 1 step ahead of the moment it was needed. Roberto was running. Justin saw him reach the south corridor, the same direction he'd disappeared the night before, same instinct, different building. Roberto moved fast for a man in a fitted suit. Almost made it. Soren was faster. The sound of it was brief. Roberto hit the floor and did not get up on his own. Then Ivan Oleg came through the main entrance, not hiding behind his people, walking through them straight down the center of the ballroom, like a man who had decided that if this was how it ended, it was going to end face forward. He was older than Justin had imagined. Gray at the temples, a scar that ran from his left ear to his jaw, the deliberate, unhurried walk of someone who had been the most dangerous person in many rooms and had stopped needing to announce it. He had a gun. He raised it toward Claudio. Justin was not close enough to do anything useful. He knew that. He did it anyway. He stepped into the line of sight. Not between Claudio and the gun, not quite, but into Oleg's peripheral vision, moving fast enough that Oleg's aim shifted for 1 second, instinctively tracking the new movement. 1 second. That was all Claudio needed. The shot that followed was not from Oleg's gun. Oleg went down hard, wounded, alive. Claudio had made that choice deliberately and Justin understood it. A dead Oleg answered no questions. A living one answered all of them. The remaining shooters stopped. The room went quiet. Roberto, on the floor near the south corridor, was breathing but not moving. Alive. Claudio would make that choice deliberately too. Justin stood in the center of the ballroom floor. His heart was hitting his ribs like it wanted out. His legs held. He wasn't sure how. Claudio walked toward him through the broken glass and the overturned chairs and the settling dust of a war that had lasted 48 hours and was now, finally, done. He stopped in front of Justin. Looked at him. Not the way he'd looked at Justin across the restaurant last night. Assessing, careful, guarded. Just looked. Like a man seeing something clearly for the first time and not wanting to look away. Justin opened his mouth to say something. His legs gave out. Not dramatically. Not a collapse. Just a slow, quiet surrender. The body's honest accounting of 2 days with no sleep, a blizzard escape, a gunfight, and now this. His knees went and the floor was coming up, and then Claudio's arms were there before he reached it. Warm. Steady. Justin pressed his forehead against Claudio's shoulder and breathed. Just breathed. The ballroom was quiet around them. The war was over. And Justin Brent. Invisible Omega, invisible waiter, invisible to everyone who had ever looked through him instead of at him, was being held in the center of the room by the most powerful man in Chicago. Not hidden. Not invisible. Seen. Chicago at sunrise after a blizzard is one of the quieter things in the world. The snow had stopped overnight. The city was buried in it. Everything white and still and softened at the edges, like the whole skyline had been wrapped carefully and set down. The lake was there again, gray-blue and flat, visible from the penthouse window in the early light. Justin watched it. He had slept for 11 hours. He couldn't remember the last time that had happened. The guest room was warm and quiet and the tea on the nightstand was fresh. Someone had checked without waking him. He sat on the edge of the bed for a while, just existing in the specific peace of a morning after something that was finally over. His phone had 3 messages from Clara. The first one said, "They gave me the good medicine today, it didn't even hurt that bad." The second one said, "The nurse here is really nice, her name is Ms. Delphine, and she let me pick the music." The third one said, "Justin, are you okay? I heard something happened where you work on the news." He typed back, "I'm okay. Keep picking the music. I love you." He set the phone down, pressed his hands flat on his knees, breathed. Varric knocked on the open door at 8:30. He looked, as always, like he had not been inconvenienced by any of the events of the last 2 days. He told Justin that Dr. Solis had cleared a full prenatal care plan, that Clara's treatment was funded through the end of the year, with a review for extension in November, that Roberto had been handed to a federal contact who had been building a case against Ivan Oleg's network for 3 years and now had everything he needed. Varric said all of this the way Varric said everything. Flat, clear, without performance. Then he said, "Claudio wants to talk to you. When you're ready." Justin found him in the main room. Claudio was standing at the window, coffee in one hand. The city laid out below him, white and quiet in the morning light. He heard Justin come in and turned. He looked like a man who had made a decision and was about to say it out loud and had not yet chosen the exact words. Justin waited. "You could go home," Claudio said. "I want you to know that. The threat is contained. You're not obligated to be here. Clara's care doesn't change regardless." Justin looked at him. "That's not a question." "No, it's context." Claudio set his coffee down. "The question is whether you want something different." The room was quiet. Outside, Chicago was waking up under 3 feet of snow. Slowly, carefully, the way a city wakes up when it knows it has work to do. Justin thought about the note he'd written on a restaurant receipt with shaking hands. He thought about jumping off a ledge in a blizzard into darkness. He thought about 11 hours of uninterrupted sleep in a room where nobody needed anything from him and the tea was always fresh. You said nothing happens without my consent, Justin said. Yes. Say it again. Claudio looked at him directly. Nothing happens without your consent. Justin nodded once. He didn't say yes. He didn't need to. Claudio understood it. He could read a room too. 3 days later, at a press event outside the Tory building on Michigan Avenue, a reporter with a recorder pointed at Claudio's face asked the question the whole city had been asking since the story broke. She said, "Who is he?" Claudio turned. Beside him, not behind, not to the side, stood Justin Brent. Tailored coat, collar at his throat, one hand resting at his side. Relaxed, the specific calm of a man who had learned what it felt like to be safe and had decided to stay there. Claudio answered without hesitation. "The official consort of the Tory family," he said. "And the person this city has to thank for what didn't happen 3 nights ago." The cameras flashed. Chicago heard the name. Justin Brent. Not invisible. Not a waiter in borrowed clothes running on expired suppressors and borrowed time. The person who had walked into the most dangerous room in the city with nothing but a folded receipt and the nerve to use it. That evening, back in the penthouse, with the city lit up below them and Clara's voice on speaker laughing about Ms. Delphine and the music choices and the fact that the hospital pudding was actually not terrible. Claudio leaned close to Justin and said something quiet. "Chicago knows your name now." Justin looked at the window, at the city, at the life he had not planned and could not have imagined and was standing inside of anyway. "I know," he said. Then Claudio added, just as quiet, "Our enemies do too." Justin turned. Claudio's eyes were calm, but the words settled in the room like the first stone dropped into still water. The war with Ivan Oleg was over. Roberto was behind glass. But Oleg had people. And people like that didn't stop because the man at the top went down. They waited. They reorganized. They picked a new moment. And somewhere in Chicago, under 3 feet of snow, in a city that had just learned Justin Brent's name, that moment was already being chosen. This story is not over. If Justin's courage moved something in you today, drop a comment and tell us what it was. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. And if you believe that one quiet act of bravery can change the direction of everything, share this story with someone who needs to be reminded of that today. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story coming to this channel is one you will not want to miss. We are building something here. Story by story, chapter by chapter, that is about more than drama. It is about people who showed up when everything told them not to. Justin showed up. And so did you. We will see you in the next one.